It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes. We have a great show for you tonight. Very excited to be back here with you tonight on Thursday. We have a lot to talk about tonight, lots to get into. Big show. That was a little weird. It's Thursday, not Wednesday. We got a lot to talk about tonight. Our featured story, we're talking all about Venezuela, back in the news. And at this point, we're just waiting. We are hanging out. Happening General, get in here. Venezuela General, get in here. When is this war going to start? Well, it could be any day now. The big news is that the Trump administration is vowing to strike ground targets inside Venezuela after destroying a number of small vessels in the water off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean, which are claimed to be drug smuggling boats, but we don't know that. And we'll talk all about the geopolitics of South America. It's actually very interesting. And if you've been watching the show for a long time, you might remember we covered the election of Javier Milei in Argentina a lot back in 2023, in the fall of 2023, and then in the aftermath of that election. And what you're seeing play out is a comprehensive hemispheric defense strategy, hemispheric influence strategy. And there's been a number of developments in South America, notably the bailout of Argentina, $40 billion bailout by the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. At the same time, Bolivia has elected a new president, a conservative. He held a call with the Venezuelan opposition leader after his election. And then you have this imminent war. So we'll talk about the war in Venezuela, but we'll talk about the broader situation in South America because there is a lot going on there. And I'm going to be honest with you. Maybe this is a controversial take. I don't mind any of it. I really don't. I don't really mind seeing this because this is our rightful sphere of influence. And I've said it since the beginning of the Venezuela campaign. I am hesitant to endorse a war or even regime change for that matter. But I think that in a conversation about foreign aid, bailouts, kinetic operations, shooting, I think it's a lot more viable. I think it makes a lot more sense when you're talking about South America than when you're talking about the Middle East. And I've said it throughout the history of this show. I'm not anti-war. I'm not a non-interventionist. I am not even against foreign aid necessarily as a tool of statecraft. People always like to say, well, I'm against all foreign aid. I'm against foreign aid to Israel, okay? I'm not against foreign aid. I'm against foreign aid to Israel because there's only one reason that they have so much of it, and that's because they control our government. But America's an empire. We do have legitimate strategic interests, national interests, and I think we should use our military and our money to shore those up. Now, in the case of Argentina, I don't necessarily support this bailout, but I don't in principle oppose using money, using power in a legitimate way in a region that we control. And I think that's actually a necessary contribution to this conversation because, and without getting into it right away, I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, her interview with Tucker Carlson, and to her credit, she's come a long way on a lot of these issues, but she came out very strongly against the bailout in Argentina and said, I don't know, this ain't America first. And it's like, well, I think that's debatable. At the least, I think that's debatable. Because the argument for foreign aid for Israel and Ukraine, that's a difficult argument to make. But an argument for foreign aid in our hemisphere, I think that's easier. I don't think it's indisputable. I don't think that it's a given, but a lot easier to make the case that we should be meddling in the affairs of other countries that are proximate to us than all the way over there. That's just my opinion. So I know that's not going to be an extremely popular take, but if there is to be an American foreign policy for our American empire, this is what it would look like, to be honest with you. So we'll talk all about that. We'll get into it. I'll explain my point of view on that. If we have time, we'll talk about this really awkward conversation between the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and the Prime Minister of Israel concerning the subject of Israel's status relative to the United States. There's been a lot of talk in America about the U.S.-Israel relationship, and of course, as you know, we believe Israel controls our system. Israel is the base of operations of international Jewry. International Jewry runs our country. Jewish oligarchs, billionaires, other elites, they manipulate our system, and they do it to benefit Israel and themselves. We all know that. But lately, there's been this discussion inside the United States from the right wing, from Steve Bannon, from Tucker Carlson, and others, and they want to put Israel in its proper place. They say, Israel is our client. We are their superpower patron. They are our client, our satellite. Some say Israel is our protectorate, a vassal, a suzerain. And of course, that's not the reality of the relationship. Some wish this were the case, and they say that we should start treating Israel that way. Well, today, J.D. Vance met with Netanyahu, and they talked about this, and Vance said, Israel's not our client state. They're not our puppet. They're our partner. And Netanyahu said the same thing, and it was very awkward. And Vance is tripping over himself to say, no, we don't control Israel. We're not supervising them. They are their own country. Well, why aren't they a protectorate? Why not? And maybe it makes them uncomfortable, and maybe they don't want to say it, and maybe it's uncomfortable to say it in front of them, but we should say that. And if they don't want to be a protectorate, then we should stop giving them money. How about that? This is not a relationship of equals. Vance and Netanyahu are standing there reassuring Israel, no, they're a partner. We want to collaborate. This is on the basis of peers or equals. There's nothing equal about it. You're a nothing country. You have no people, no economy. You wouldn't exist without us. What are you talking about? We're partners? No, we own you. We own you. We own you. We could destroy you. We could pull the plug and let everyone else destroy you. Yeah, you're our protectorate. You're our bitch. That should be what Vance said. Vance should have said that. He won't, but you'll know that we have America first when a president is willing to say that because, look, what characterizes this relationship is dependency. That is the fundamental principle involved, which is that Israel is completely contingent on us. And therein lies the problem. A nation that is contingent on a host has to obey its host. It has to do whatever the host says. And what's more, it has to show deference, respect, arguably reverence. They should be bowing down to us. That's what makes the relationship so sick. Because you could say, arguably, that if France wants to break with the United States, I think that would be less offensive because France is not contingent on America for its existence in a fundamental way. You could argue the same is true of Japan, the same is true of other major countries, but that's not the case with Israel. They are a total dependent. They're totally contingent. So they should be worshiping us. Netanyahu should be here kissing our walls, kissing the bean in Chicago or kissing, I don't know, something. That's really the issue. So if we have time, we'll get into that. We'll talk about that conversation. It was sort of interesting. And it's a good thing. I think it's a good development that that's even happening. But those will be our big stories. Before we get into it, I want to remind you to smash the follow button on Rumble, smash the like button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the show. Check out our store, Fuentes.store. We have the America First hats, iconic. You got to get rid of your MAGA hats. This Trump administration's a joke. You know, this is like a Jewish hat now. You know, the Jews, they're very fond of their hats. They have like a little hat. They have like a bigger hat. Then they have the huge hats. And then they have this one. Now they have this one. And this hat basically means you're like an Israel worshiping cuck. You know, you put this on and it says, oh, I love Israel. We all know that now. I'm embarrassed to have. It's funny because at one time this hat used to mean you were like the furthest right. You would get beat up by left-wing people for wearing this. Now it's like no one even cares. Like whatever. This is the new hat. This is the hat. Lets everybody know you mean business. It means what it says, America First. Fuentes.store. We also have a brand new t-shirt. We have a brand new flag. I think you'll love it. It has George Washington on it. It says beware of foreign influence. It's very cool. Fuentes.store. Subscribe to the website if you love the show. Become a Plus member. Subscriptions start at $15 a month, but they go up to $100 a month. And you get access to me in a group chat. You get to talk to me, hang out with me. I tell you all the inside baseball, all the secrets, all the gossip. It's fun. That's at AmericaFirst.plus. One other thing before we get into the news. I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, but what are we doing here? It's so bad. So Candace Owens has disappeared for about a week. I don't know what's going on with that, but she's come back very hard and very powerfully and very strongly. And she's on the timeline today posting more screenshots of her text with Charlie Kirk. And this one is brutal. She did not have to do him like this. Why? Why did she expose him? Let the man rest, Candace. Let him rest. I'll show you what I'm talking about. I don't know if you saw it. But today, Candace posted more screenshots of her texts with Charlie Kirk. And the caption is just, she writes, 2018 was such a ride. Charlie went from not knowing the difference between Jay-Z and Kanye to texting me like this on his daily runs. Everyone in politics was fake and gay, but at least we had hip-hop. Oh, come on. Come on. Come on. What are you talking about? Oh, it sounds like she's narrating a movie. Everything back in those days was fake and gay, but at least we had our hip-hop. What the fuck are you talking about? You stupid bitch. Then she posts the screenshots. This is rough stuff. Guys, this is rough. How do I zoom in on this? So she posts a screenshot. She's doing this, please. It's making me feel bad. I didn't even like Charlie Kirk. And the way they are doing him, it's disgusting. The way that she is taking advantage of this for her own benefit. Talk about milking it. Dude, his udders are chapped. The way that she is milking this tragedy and his death, it's actually disgusting. Posting screenshots of their texts, it's been almost 2 months. What purpose does this serve? Anyway, she posts a screenshot. This is Charlie. In 2018, he sends her a screenshot from his phone. He's listening to Monster by Kanye off of Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. He says, yeah. He says, yeah. He said, and by the way, for those that don't know, Monster from Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Nicki Minaj is featured on the song. Okay. So the Barbs love this song. He goes, yeah. She says, oh my gosh, Nicki's verse on that is the best. Then he quotes the song. He says, first things first, I eat your brains. She says, yes. Oh my gosh. This makes me so happy. Oh man. Dude, You do not have to do him like this. Why are you doing my man so dirty like this? That's part one. Part two, we'll pull up. Let the man rest. Charlie says, Sasquatch, Godzilla, this is more lyrics from the song. Godzilla, King Kong, Loch Ness, Goblin, Ghoul, Zombie with no conscience. And then he does this emoji. I'm getting secondhand embarrassment and he's dead, okay? He says, when Nikki drops, I lose my mind. She replies, she is the best. I do my weights to that song. Jay-Z's verse is amazing too. Makes me think of where I'm at. All I get is these fake f***s with no fangs trying to draw blood from my ice cold veins. That's another lyric. Yes, it gets the blood flowing. I am about to run a few miles jamming to it. Candace replies, I am loving your hip hop development. I'm deceased. That's it. I'm dead. I'm deceased. How could she do him so dirty like this? She is, Candace, you're not doing what you think you're doing. This is wrong, okay? This is wrong. This is wrong. This is not right. Why are you exposing him for queening out like this? What is the point of this? What is the matter with you? I replied, I said, damn, you didn't have to expose him like this. What is even the point? How about some evidence? Listen, Candace, if you're going to accuse his wife, the president, Emmanuel Macron, Egypt, of killing him, show us the evidence. Stop exposing him for queening out a little bit to Nicki Minaj and Monster. Those are the texts we want to see. What is the purpose of this other than to embarrass your friend? This is getting a little ridiculous. And I'm joking a little bit, of course, because, yeah, the text messages it's a little revealing, okay? It's a little revealing. Like, it's kind of, this may be the most damning text messages I think we've seen so far. You know, I mean, that's pretty rough. That's pretty embarrassing. And I'm joking about it a little bit, but I mean, on a more serious note, this is actually exploitative at this point. And again, I don't mean to sound self-righteous because you know where I stand on Charlie Kirk. I did not like the guy. I didn't like what he stood for outside of his evangelization for Christianity. I didn't stand for his politics. I didn't like that. I didn't like him. He didn't like me. Like, we never got along, and it wasn't clear that we ever would. With that being said, this is disturbing. Whatever you think about what happened there, who killed him, why they killed him, this is totally outside the scope of that. This is far beyond an investigation into his murder or who might have benefited from the murder. This is just exploitative. This is just taking everything that you have, everything that is maybe endearing, everything that is maybe emotionally charged, and basically airing it out, stringing this all up for everybody to see. For what purpose other than your own aggrandizement? For what purpose other than for people to say, wow. And there was a time and place for this. I think Candace did a very nice eulogy for Charlie. I think it was the day after he died. It was either the day of or the day after. I think she did a very lovely eulogy for him. It was 27 minutes. It was, I thought, very heartfelt. And that was bordering on narcissistic also, but that was her way of mourning or coping with it at the time. But here we are 2 months later. This is just getting a little bit excessive and gratuitous. And I have to say, that is what is so disgusting about everything that has taken place since Charlie died. And again, not to sound self-righteous about it, but I'm a big believer that you live by the grift, you die by the grift. And in politics, which Charlie was a part of, conservative politics in particular, he surrounded himself with the biggest grifters. He was extremely ambitious, wanted to be the head of the RNC or something like that. And so he was surrounded by the money, by the craven money whores that take money from donors, but also by the donors, by the billionaires, by the interests. Silicon Valley, Israel, you name it. Every billionaire, every lobbyist, he was surrounded by them. And it is fitting that in his death, you see the way they are circling overhead. You see the way the scavengers are literally circling his corpse, picking apart everything, whether it was the Republican rally / funeral that was held a couple weeks later and the fundraising push, but also on a personal level with his closest friends. They're going to be drudging up, literally dredging their phones for every text message to air out on social media for engagement like this. What purpose does this serve? And honestly, on some level, it's not even a joke. This is kind of embarrassing. Like, this is a private moment. Is this really appropriate? Would Charlie want his personal direct text messages aired out? Because it's one thing if this had any relation to the investigation into his murder, because then you could suspend all other concerns about privacy or about his intentions or his wishes and say everything in the service of in getting to the bottom of his murder is necessary. So making things public that maybe he wished were kept private, you could argue on that basis, you might have other considerations. We need to get to the bottom of the murder for the sake of justice. But what purpose does this serve? Other than your own aggrandizement, seriously. This is just so inappropriate now at this point, and it's just disgusting. It's actually just gross. And for the record, if anybody kills me, God forbid, if anybody kills me, please do not feel emboldened to release all our text messages. That's not for public consumption. And I hope I don't want to get killed. And I don't want to die anytime soon. But if it does, just for anybody out there, please do not air out everything I ever said in private, no matter how personal or how private, because you want to get engagement on Twitter. Please don't do that. Unless it's helpful in seeing who killed me. I mean, seriously. So, I saw this and I'm making a little bit of a joke about it, somewhat at Charlie's expense. Because it's a little bit funny, but on a real note, this is kind of getting disgusting. And I think everybody's starting to turn a little bit on her. It's one thing if you have evidence and, if there are still stones to be unturned or turned over, I should say, if there's still evidence out there, we want somebody chasing that down. We want somebody getting to the bottom of the real conspiracy if there is one. But this is nothing sacred, This is just offensive at this point. So I saw these text messages, and the first thing I thought is, wow, Charlie Kirk was a barb. She caught him tweeting out. But then I thought, really? Everyone in politics was fake and gay, but at least we had hip hop. I mean, what are you talking about? Like, cut the shit, drop the act. Let's just stop, okay? Let's just stop before you blow your whole husband's fortune on defamation lawsuits. Does anybody appreciate this, by the way? Is Erica Kirk on board with this? Are Charlie's friends and family on board with this? Who does she think she is to air all this stuff out? This is like a level of female, black, entitled narcissism that I have never seen before. And once you look at Candace Owens through that lens, you'll never look at her the same way again. Once you realize that she is just another black female narcissist with zero shame, you'll never look at her the same way again. Because that's really what characterizes black women. They have no shame, and not all of them. There's actually a lot of black women that like my show. But there are a lot of black women that you will see on the body cam footage, that you will see freaking out at a cash register. And what characterizes them is this total self-absorbing pride, total narcissism, and no shame. Always outraged, never ashamed. And it is literally no different. It's just in another domain. In the same way that you get some black woman at the cash register, at the check-in counter at the airport. What you mean? What you mean? Fighting with the cops. It's just a different flavor of that with Candace Owens. Always outraged, never ashamed. That's her show. That is her show every day. Calling everyone out. Feeling emboldened and entitled to call everybody out, wagging her finger in everyone's face. I'm going to get to the bottom. I'm doing this. I'm going to tell you what's really going on. Never ashamed, no shame. When she's wrong, when she lies, when she doesn't know what she's talking about, when she does inappropriate stuff like this, always outraged, never ashamed. That's the black female narcissism. And by the way, she wasn't even willing to admit, she denies race. This is the reality of race. Sadly. She went from graduating high school, suing her classmates for being racist, to this. Always outraged, never ashamed. As far as Candace is concerned, it's just another case of black fatigue for me. Another case of black fatigue. Where's the honor? Where's the honor and dignity? You'll never get it. You'll never get it from her. Never, ever. Anyway, so that's that. But I do want to move on. We got to get into our serious news here. But I saw that text and I said, seriously? Nope, nobody's over there saying, is it a good idea here to press the post button? Is this actually the right thing to do, to press publish? But that never factors in. Is it the right thing? Is it honorable? Is it something with integrity? Absolutely not. So it's good to see that people are starting to sour on her and see her for what she really is. And I get the appeal. I get why people like her. I understand it. But I think people are starting to see what she really is, which is she's Candace Owens first. She's not America first. She's not even white. I don't even think she's really Catholic first. I think she's Candace Owens first. That's always what will come first, even before her friends like Charlie Kirk, before the truth, before the country. So anyway, that's that. But I do want to move on. I want to get into our news here. I got to tell you, though, I'm really addicted to the body camera footage. That's been on the mind lately. And I see her in that. I don't know about you guys. I've been on TikTok for like the past week, and that's my whole For You page. It's just the body camera footage. I've been loving it. But anyway, just on that note, we're going to move on. We're going to get into the news. We're going to get into our featured story, which is all about Venezuela. And like I said at the top of the show, we're just in the waiting room here. We are on the cusp of an all-out war with Venezuela. President of no new wars, by the way, the president of peace. Donald Trump has brought us to the brink of another war in the Caribbean with Venezuela. And we've been talking about this for weeks. We've been talking about this slow and gradual buildup of our military posture in the region, these strikes on what the administration claims to be, which are small drug smuggling vessels off the coast of Venezuela. And now the big development today is that the Trump administration has announced that it will soon be looking at ground targets to strike inside Venezuela. So far, the campaign against Venezuela has consisted in a major bounty against Nicolas Maduro, $50 million reward for his death or capture. CIA has been authorized to operate inside Venezuela against the Maduro regime. The administration has backed the claim of Maduro's rival, Machado. Her party, according to the UN and watchdog groups, won the election, the presidential election last year, as well as what has been well documented, which are these military strikes against drug smuggling boats off the coast of Venezuela, which are not even really heading towards the United States. Really, they're headed towards probably Trinidad and Tobago because they're small vessels. They're not crossing the entire Gulf of America to get to Texas or Florida. These are small boats. They're local. And now, like I said, the latest escalation is Trump said he's actually going to bomb Venezuela. And this is a story from the New York Times. We'll go through it and we'll talk about the whole situation. It says, quote, President Trump on Wednesday suggested that U.S. strikes on alleged drug shipments on land could be coming soon amid the U.S. bombing campaign targeting boats in Latin America. Trump has made similar comments before, and according to multiple media reports, the U.S. is preparing to bomb Venezuela with the goal of ousting Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, and is using the crackdown on drug trafficking as the pretext. The president claimed to reporters at the White House that he had legal authority to launch the strikes, but Congress has not authorized the bombing campaign, which the Constitution requires for launching a war. Trump said that he may notify Congress of the plans to launch strikes on land targets, but didn't say he would seek authorization. He said, we will hit them very hard when they come in by land, and they haven't experienced that yet, but now we're totally prepared to do that. We'll probably go back to Congress and explain exactly what we're doing when they come to the land. Since September 2nd, the U.S. has bombed at least 7 boats in the Caribbean and 1 in the Eastern Pacific near Colombia, extrajudicially killing 34 people at sea. Sources told the Washington Post on Wednesday that any airstrikes in Venezuela would likely first target alleged trafficker encampments or clandestine airstrips, but regime change remains the ultimate goal. The U.S. has built up a significant force in the Caribbean and has flown heavy bombers and special operations forces helicopters near Venezuela, which officials say is part of a psychological campaign against Maduro. Leaks against the U.S. preparing to launch airstrikes and Trump signing off on covert operations inside the country are also part of a psychological operation aimed at Maduro and the Venezuelan people. So just very quickly, in the first place, let's be very clear about what is happening here and the timeline. Make no mistake about it, this is a push for regime change. And maybe that's obvious. I think that's pretty clear at this point. But that is not what the administration is publicly saying. What they have been saying over the course of the past 7 or 8 months is that they are fighting a military campaign against drug traffickers and drug cartels. The administration has rebranded the drug cartels as terrorists. He says they are narco-terrorists. And he is using the drug epidemic inside the United States, particularly with cocaine and fentanyl and other drugs from Central and South America. He is saying that those deaths amount to terrorism. So if a U.S. adult citizen buys fentanyl or buys heroin or buys cocaine or crack and they die from an overdose, Trump says that is a terrorism death. That is a terrorism-related fatality, which of course it is really not. He says that as such, every one of those deaths that's as a result of drug smuggling and drug trafficking represents terrorism, and the people that are responsible for creating the drugs, trafficking the drugs, distributing the drugs, they are in effect terrorists, and they're part of the global war on terror. And that means that we're at war with them. So they've rebranded it. And in the service of this, the administration has brought U.S. naval vessels and Air Force assets and military personnel into the Caribbean, on the islands off the coast of Venezuela, in the waters off the coast of Venezuela. And they're targeting Venezuela, saying that Venezuela and its regime are propped up by what they call narco-terrorists. And in particular, 2 drug cartels like Tren de Aragua and another one which people say isn't even real. They say finance the regime. It's important to understand, however, that all of this is a pretext. None of this is real. This is one of the most brazen lies to get us into a war that I've ever seen. Because most of the drugs that are manufactured don't come from Venezuela. And most of the drugs that are trafficked into the United States don't come from Venezuela either. We have legitimate targets among the drug cartels. They are in Colombia. They are in Mexico. They're in Central America. They're also in South America, but they're not really in Venezuela. That's not where the bulk of drug trafficking occurs, and almost none of the drug manufacturing occurs there. Just isn't the case. The reality is that It is not about drug trafficking. If it was, we would be at war and conducting special operations in Mexico. We would be doing it in the Northern Triangle. We'd be in Colombia. Maybe we'd be in Venezuela, but we'd be in Venezuela not first, second, or third. We'd be there later. So the reality is this is a very thinly veiled pretext for a war with Venezuela, the real object of which is regime change. Why? It's simple. Because for the past 22 years, Venezuela has been controlled by a socialist regime, which is ideologically opposed to the United States. And more than that, Venezuela has aligned itself strategically with U.S. adversaries like China, Russia, and Iran. And it is U.S. strategic doctrine that the entire Western Hemisphere is our domain. So although there are regimes contrary to the United States, like Nicaragua, like Cuba, like Venezuela, increasingly the United States has little tolerance for this. And especially in the past 5 years, the United States, the U.S. Southern Command, the CIA, and the State Department has sought to overturn the influence of American strategic opponents in Central and South America. This is the bigger picture. This is the bigger story. Washington recognizes that across the board, we are losing Central and South America to China. China has increasingly become the major or the second biggest trading partner of almost all Central and South American countries. And that's bringing with it Chinese political and military presence. China is investing in dual-use infrastructure in South America. For example, deep water ports, which have a commercial use for shipping, but they also might in the future have a military use because China could station military naval vessels there or build Chinese naval bases there. So the increased trade relations, the increased political and strategic engagement with China has the United States very concerned. So there has been an across-the-board effort, for example, in our effort to oust China from Panama and the Panama Canal. The United States push, I think, to get Javier Milei elected in Argentina. The maximum pressure campaign on Venezuela and Cuba. The cooling of relations with Brazil. This is part of a concerted effort by Washington and Central and South America to undo this trend where they have lost their grip on the Western Hemisphere and losing influence to China. And Venezuela is a major part of this. It is Venezuela's purchase of Russian weapons. It's their collaboration with Iran. It's their sale of oil to these countries in China, the investment from China. This is the real problem that Washington has. And in particular, Venezuela is not a very big country. It's not one of the most important countries in South America. It doesn't even come close to the biggest population, doesn't come close to the biggest landmass, doesn't come close to the biggest economy or the biggest military. In terms of importance, it ranks maybe 5th, 6th, or 7th out of 10 or 11 South American countries. It's not high up on the list, but what is important about Venezuela is its resources. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves, heavy sour crude oil, which our oil industry processes in the Gulf Coast. It has gold. It has natural gas. This is why the United States is interested in Venezuela. It has nothing to do with drugs. Venezuela is not a target because of drug manufacturing, drug trafficking into the United States, drug deaths in the United States. It has almost nothing to do with Venezuela. The reason that Venezuela is number one on the list is because this is meant to send a message to all of our strategic competitors like Russia and China, as well as to their clients in Central and South America, like, let's say, Nicaragua or like Peru or other countries, that this is what happens when you don't obey the United States. It's about the strategic alignment of Venezuela, and it's also about their oil and their gold. So, in the first place, let's be very clear. This is a pretext for regime change. The drug trafficking thing, the narco-terrorism thing, like with any pretext for war, there is some truth to it. It's not to say that Venezuela doesn't manufacture any drugs or doesn't traffic any drugs, but it's marginal compared to the other major drug producers and drug trafficking states. The real reason they're number one on the list has to do with the grand strategy of the United States, which is to secure the Western Hemisphere as a sphere of influence for the United States. That's the purpose. Let's be clear about that. And so the buildup to the war has been very interesting. Trump is deploying these naval vessels, conducting these strikes against small boats. And let's talk about specifically what the administration has done. Their first action was to put a $50 million bounty on the head of Maduro. Why? It's an extremely corrupt regime. It's a dysfunctional and poor country that is not economically efficient, that is struggling. The goal of putting the $50 million bounty is to try to get some of the top lieutenants in the regime to betray Maduro. It's to create a coup. That's effectively what that is. They're paying Maduro's inner circle to start a coup against him so they could take the ransom payment. Then Trump brings in the naval vessels and starts bombing. He's flying B-1 bombers, B-52 bombers over Venezuela. I'm sure the naval vessels are literally visible from the coast. They're putting radar in Grenada. They want Venezuela to feel the presence of the U.S. military. And the message is indelible. They want the top brass in the Venezuelan military to understand you're all going to die. Here's what's going to happen. The administration is going to kill you. The CIA is going to overthrow you. U.S. warships will bomb you and you will literally die. So that's behind door number one. Door number two is you take the $50 million payment, you overthrow Maduro, and then maybe you're running the country. Maybe you're running the government. That's clearly the goal here. So the objective is regime change. The tactics are a resumption of the tactics from the first administration, Trump 45, which is maximum pressure. The Trump administration does not want to invade Venezuela. It doesn't want a protracted conflict. They want to increase the pressure psychologically, economically, militarily with this gunboat display, with sanctions, with the ransom or the bounty, and they want the people inside the regime to do the work for him. Here's the problem. The Maduro regime is airtight. And they survived the first Trump administration. They tried this the first time, and it was catastrophic. 8 million people fled Venezuela, 8 million refugees, and many of them went to the United States. That was part of the 10 million that came in under Biden. 8 million refugees left Venezuela. They went to neighboring countries. They went to the United States. There were massive protests, mass starvation, hyperinflation. Venezuela was brought to the brink of collapse by maximum pressure the first time, but the Maduro regime is airtight. And the Maduro regime is so solid because it relies on Cuban intelligence. Inside every military division, inside every one of the security services, Maduro has embedded Cuban intelligence officers that basically report to him personally. And so the defectors, the traitors, the disloyal, they had been purged a long time ago. And there's a culture of fear and anxiety inside the Maduro regime. They're terrified of disloyalty. They're more terrified of Maduro than they are actually of the United States. And so this is the game that is being played. And we'll see what happens. I think, and I talked about this with Alex Jones last week, I think it is basically inevitable that the CIA and the State Department will get their regime change. The question is, how much will the United States have to do here? We put the ransom up. We're bombing the ships. We have our naval vessels there. We're flying our bombers over their airspace. We have the CIA operating in the country. We may actually engage Venezuela in ground strikes, naval strikes or air strikes targeting drug traffickers or infrastructure on the ground. And as time goes on, the pressure will increase, and the hope is that people inside the regime will break. That these special operations, the covert operations, the pressure, these things will form sort of a pincer, and the Maduro regime will not survive the next 4 years. There's another piece of the puzzle too, which is that Venezuela's neighbor, Bolivia, which was run by socialists for 20 years, just elected a conservative president. And nobody really knows what this guy's deal is yet. He seems to be open to aligning Bolivia with the United States. He had a call with the Venezuelan opposition leader this week. And so maybe the United States will have an ally in Bolivia, which will help bring down the government of Maduro. That's the chessboard right now. That's the situation in Venezuela. And as I said before, so this is the situation there. I want to take this together with what's happening elsewhere. As I said earlier, this is part of a broader strategy. The biggest development in Latin America is the intrusion of China into what is generally considered for the past 200 years America's rightful sphere of influence. This is the Monroe Doctrine, since President James Monroe, which says that we're not going to interfere in the great power politics of Europe. We're not necessarily going to interfere in a major way in the politics of Eurasia, unless forced to, like we were when we were attacked in Pearl Harbor or in other situations throughout the Cold War. But for 200 years, it's very clear that the Western Hemisphere is our domain. And why is that? It's very simple. The United States is insulated from threats from other strategic competitors like Russia, China, or in another time, France, Germany, or the United Kingdom by the oceans. It's not feasible for any country, any major dominant country on the Eurasian landmass to threaten us, because in order to even get to us, they have to cross a major ocean. They have to cross the Atlantic. They have to cross the Pacific. And so the United States has this splendid isolation. This is 101. We don't have to worry as much about Europe or Asia. We don't have to suppress or manage great power politics, because in order for them to threaten us, they would have to land an army in California or the Eastern Seaboard, and that's just not going to happen. That being said, for the United States to remain safe, we have to govern everything that does border the United States, which is North America and South America. Maybe France can't threaten us, Russia can't threaten us directly, China can't threaten us directly, or Japan for that matter. They can't threaten the homeland directly. But if they gained a foothold in Central or South America, then they could. If somehow China gained a foothold on the Pacific coast of South America, in Peru and Ecuador and Chile, in Panama and Central America, maybe then they could threaten the United States. That's why it's incumbent on us to keep all of that influence out. And that influence comes in many different forms. It doesn't start with a country pledging fealty to China. It starts with trade relations. It starts with credit. And what has happened from 2015 to 2025 is that Central and South America increasingly are conducting more trade with China. And in most of those countries, China is now their largest trading partner. And that makes them dependent on China. And China starts to come in with credit. They start to loan these countries money. And they loan these countries money to build up critical infrastructure, all kinds of things, radar dishes, ports, communication, transportation infrastructure. China provides the investment, and in exchange, these countries give China control over the infrastructure. They call this dual-use infrastructure. And so, for example, in Argentina, China is building giant dishes, which could be used for a commercial application, could also be used for a military application in the future. And if China's providing the credit and Argentina gives them control over it, let's say they get a 20-year lease on what they build, well, it's foreseeable that in 20 years, maybe China will use that against the United States in some strategic capacity. And that goes for all the infrastructure they're building. This is unacceptable to the United States. And so this has happened slowly over 10 years. The trade relation intensifies. China builds infrastructure. Governments are elected that have a left-leaning ideology. And so they're ideologically aligned with Beijing, which is technically a communist country. And so these historically left-wing or socialist governments, patronist governments like in Argentina or Bolivia, Venezuela, Peru, that helps. They're idealistically aligned with China, ideologically aligned with China. They maybe then start to buy weapons from China. They start to buy planes, guns, air defense. And then they're in a strategic relationship with China. Because in order to service and get replacement parts for the weapons, they need to be dependent on China's arms industry. This is how the United States loses its grip over the Western Hemisphere. This is how a country like China, a strategic competitor, could come to threaten the United States in this century. That's what the United States is looking at. And so this is why across the board, the United States is engaging in an all-out offense on all these countries. And what the U.S. is doing is punishing those countries that are working with China and rewarding the countries that go against China. So case in point, Venezuela has a deep relationship with China, Russia, and Iran. They've had that since the Bolivarian Revolution when Hugo Chavez took power 20 years ago. The United States is telling Venezuela, it's not good enough that you give us your oil and your gold. It's not good enough that you align with Washington. We want you and your socialist government out. We want a loyal client state in the Caribbean. And so that's the maximum pressure on Venezuela. On the contrary, with Argentina, in 2023, Argentina elected Javier Milei, who is a right-wing president. And he is ideologically pro-capitalism. He is aligned with Washington and Israel. Milei visited Washington and New York City, visited Israel when he was elected, has supported not only the U.S. war in Ukraine, but also Israel's war in Gaza. Javier Milei has canceled infrastructure projects with China. He's let the United States military come into the country and control the Paraná River, which is strategically vital for all of South America, for Argentina and Brazil. Argentina is signing critical minerals deals with the United States for their extraction of their lithium. As a result, this week, the United States is giving a $40 billion bailout to Argentina. It seems that their economy is on the brink of collapse. They might be devaluing their currency in the future. Their shock therapy economics doesn't seem to be working. And so the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, has written up a plan that we're going to give them $20 billion from the United States, another $20 billion by private banks, probably guaranteed by the United States, an investment we're never going to get back, to prop them up just because they're aligned with Washington. And this is the message. We want more pro-Western governments like Noboa in Ecuador, like Bukele in El Salvador, like Milei in Argentina. And if you cooperate, we will help you. If you're antagonistic to our interests, like Venezuela or Cuba, or in some cases Colombia, we're going to literally attack you. We're going to deprive you of foreign aid. We might put tariffs or sanctions on your country, or we might force regime change. That's the program in South America. And we have to look at it in a comprehensive way because it's interesting how America First comes into this equation. I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene on Tucker Carlson earlier this week, and she criticized the bailout of Argentina. She said it's not America First to bail out Argentina for a few reasons. She said, in the first place, we're giving them money, and the taxpayers are going to lose money on this. They're calling this, it's a complex financial instrument. It's a credit swap. It's something like that. We're exchanging our debt for their debt. We're not going to get our money back on this $40 billion bailout. There's no prospect that Argentina can pay us back. And so in the first place, Marjorie Taylor Greene says, it's not America First for taxpayer money to subsidize another country's economy. She said, what's more, Argentina's far away from us. Less than 0.5% of our exports go to Argentina. So what difference does it make? They're at the bottom of the world. They're at the bottom of the Southern Hemisphere. They don't border us. They're not even close to us. She says they're not actually a systemic ally, contrary to what Bessent said. She said, so we're bailing them out. What's more, Argentina is in direct competition with Americans. Trump's trade war with China is hurting American farmers, like soybean farmers. American farmers sell their soybeans to China. That's one of our biggest markets for soybeans. And that's a major industry in some of these breadbasket states, some of these agricultural states like Iowa. And so the leadership from Iowa is saying, why would we be subsidizing Argentina? Forget about how far they are. Forget about the fact that they're not actually a systemic ally. They're not close to us. He said, but also, we're in competition with them. They're taking our business. We sell our soybeans to China. They're selling their soybeans to China to make up the loss of our exports to them because of the trade war. And on top of that, they're also a major competitor in beef. Argentina is a major cattle ranching country, and so they're competing with us for beef as well. So Marjorie Taylor Greene says, it's not America first to bail out a country that's far away. We're subsidizing their economy with our taxpayer money. We're subsidizing actually a competitor that's taking our business for beef and soybeans. So she says, this is not America first. And the same conversation applies to Venezuela. People are saying the same thing. They say, how is it America first to engage Venezuela in another pointless regime change war? And it's coming at it from a slightly different point of view, which is not the foreign aid and trade argument for America first, that America first should be put, or rather that America should be put first when it comes to matters of money, but also matters of exports and imports. This is from another perspective, which is it's not America first to send soldiers overseas to secure the rights or the liberties or democracy for other people in a strategic capacity. But I would say that when you take the whole thing together, there is actually an America first case to be made here. And it's one that I might be skeptical of. I'm not necessarily making that argument, but I do think that this is not something that you can apply those ordinary arguments as easily. And here's what I mean by that. When we have a free trade agreement with China, or we, let's say, have China as a most favored nation, and we're letting China take advantage of currency manipulation, we're letting China take advantage of our universities, we're letting China take our manufacturing technique and expertise. Think about what has happened in the past 25 years with China. Those 10 or 15 years of unprecedented growth in China, from, let's say, 1995 or 2000 to 2015, that was all subsidized by the United States. That's because all of our manufacturing went over there. That's because all of our factories, all of our know-how, all of our technique, all of that went to China. And we allowed that when we brought them into the World Trade Organization, when we thought, and this was the bargain, this was the grand risk, the gamble of liberal hegemony, was that if we opened up trade with China, that eventually China would become a market-based economy, and then they would become a democracy, and then they would become an ally, and then we would never have any enemies in the world. That did not happen. That failed. And in pursuit of that idea, we enriched China, and now China is using those productive capacities to build up their wealth. They're using their wealth to build up their navy, and they're using that navy to challenge us strategically. And now they pose the most significant threat to the United States since the Soviet Union. And so there's an easy America first argument to be made about why we should engage China in a trade war, why we should put tariffs on them, why we should wrest control of our supply chains from them and countries that are influenced by them. Like, that makes sense. And let's say from the point of view of foreign aid, we give Israel $3.8 billion in foreign aid. We give Egypt $800 million in foreign aid. We give Jordan a lot of money in foreign aid. All of this is in the service of Israel. All of this is to keep Israel from fighting its neighbors. And you could genuinely say Israel is not even an important country. They're not in an important region. The important regions in the Middle East are the Persian Gulf. That's what's important in the Middle East. What's important is the Suez Canal, the Bosporus Strait, not the Eastern Mediterranean. That really doesn't matter that much. There's no oil there. There's no resources there. It's not an OPEC country. Like, there's no energy there. So there's no resources like there is with the rest of it. There's not a huge population there. There's not a significant waterway or anything like that. Israel's not strategically important. They're oceans away. They're not a poor country. And it's also a country that is aligned with the United States, and there's no reason to worry that they would drift anywhere else. So that's a legitimate argument and an easy argument where you say, why are we giving them all this money? We've given them $250 billion at the low end since the foundation of Israel, $250 billion. And that's a low estimate since 1948. That's not without compounding interest, which matters over an 80-year period. There's an easy argument to be made that that is not America first. But this is different. Or at least it could be argued that this is different, because this is our legitimate sphere of influence. This is a legitimate strategic interest of the United States. You could argue that defeating Iran and having regime change there, that's not really a strategic interest of the United States. It's hard to make that case. And bailing out Israel, same thing. And Ukraine, same thing. It's pretty convoluted to make the case that those types of interventions, that type of foreign aid, free trade with China, it's hard to make that case that that's America first. But in South America, it's a little bit different. Is not South and Central and North America, are these not America's backyard? Are they not America's legitimate sphere of influence? Does it not matter for the United States and the security of our homeland? Does it not matter for those things what happens in South and Central America? I think it does. And here's a perfect example. When we engaged Venezuela in our maximum pressure campaign in the first term, you had this exodus of 8 million refugees, and they all came here. They all came here. Many of them came here, and they came to all the major cities, and they brought with them gangs, crime, or in some cases, they just started devouring our resources, devouring our public services. They were taking up space in hospitals, taking public housing. We had to put them in hotels, build camps for them in New York City, in Chicago. They're a major crime problem. They're taking over apartment complexes. Maybe Iran could not reach the United States with a missile from their homeland, but what if some of these advanced weapon systems found their way into Cuba or Venezuela? They could legitimately pose a threat. How about the Cuban Missile Crisis? And maybe that's far-fetched. That's a different century. But I think it demonstrates that the same arguments that you could use about Ukraine or Israel, which would be something like, why are we giving a country that's so far away all this money? That doesn't threaten us. That doesn't matter to us. Who cares about Estonia? Who cares about the West Bank and the Gaza Strip? You can make that argument, but Cuba, Venezuela, they're not far from us. They can touch us. They're right here. And if these countries can touch us, and these countries are aligned with our adversaries, then our adversaries can touch us, at least theoretically, or on a long enough timeline. So, is it so simple when you're talking about the geopolitical strategy here in South and Central America to say that writing a check or bringing the military in is never America first? I don't think it's as clear cut. And I'm not saying I endorse regime change necessarily. I'm not saying I endorse the bailout. I'll be very clear about that. I don't think we should bail out Argentina, and I don't think that we should engage Venezuela in a ground war. I also think that regime change has a lot of risks. So I have my reservations about both of these deals. I don't think it's great optics, and I also don't think it's a great idea to bail out Argentina. We're never going to see a return on that investment. And in Venezuela, I think that regime change could be catastrophic. So I still think there are risks associated with these things. I still think it could be argued that it's not being handled in the best way. With that being said, it is not as simple as these other countries. And we need to start to think of ourselves in America first, not as this republic, we're the shining city on a hill. We're nationalists. Yes, we're nationalists. We want America to have a distinct national identity and national interests. But we have to keep in mind that America is an indispensable country in the world. And by that, I mean, we do actually have global interests. We do have regional interests. Whether we like it or not, we are an empire. And is it in the best interest of the American people to pull up the drawbridge and retreat into the fortress and just let China take over the world? Let these other countries take over our territory, our domain? I don't think so. I think that it is actually better for Americans to have an empire. I think we want to have an empire. That's always been my position on this. And to the extent that Israel is a hostile power, to the extent that Israel is going against us, then maybe they don't fit into that equation. But the Western Hemisphere is ours. South and Central America belongs to us. Their resources belong to us. Their markets belong to us. And we want the best industries. We want the best jobs. We want the things that generate the most wealth. We want the industries, the industries that are the most productive. So we don't want to give all the manufacturing to Mexico, let's say, for example. But we also do want to keep Mexico on our side of the ledger. And we also want to keep, in my opinion, South America on our side of the ledger. I think that it would be a good thing if America could take all their oil and natural gas. We need the energy. We want the energy. We're coming up on the end of the fracking boom. We want their oil and natural gas. They're not making enough of it because of the pressure on them. Strictly speaking, it would be better if there was an American-aligned government there that could optimally and efficiently extract those resources and send them to the United States. It'd be better for our economy. It'd be better for our technology industry. In the era where electricity and energy is a very important commodity for intelligence and for defense, that's a good thing, actually. So I like the idea that Trump brings to the table. When he talks about annexing Canada and Greenland, I'm for that. When he talks about overturning these regimes in the Western Hemisphere, I'm hesitant to support regime change. I think it has a poor track record, but in principle, I like it. I like the idea of it. And I actually don't like these kinds of, I don't like these small-minded arguments where people say, anytime America uses its wealth and power, that's not America first. Well, what exactly is America first? Is the only thing that the military can do to patrol the border? That we should just be patrolling the cities and the border and all the other countries can go to hell? And some people might say yes, but I would say no, we want to control our periphery. We want to control a sphere of influence. Is that not what every other country is doing? What is Russia doing? What is China doing? What is Iran doing? They're securing their sphere of influence. They're securing their periphery. They're securing that for the sake of trade routes, supply chains, resources, power projection. If that's such a bad thing for America, why is every other country engaging in that in some form? This isolationism is good enough for us, but it's not good enough for Russia. It's not good enough for China. I don't believe that we should abandon our imperial ambitions. I just think we should be more honest about them, and I think we should be more strategic about them. I think we should diminish some of our commitments on the far reaches of the empire, and I think we should shore up the interests that are closer to us, and that would be the Caribbean, that would be the Western Hemisphere. So, and again, this is not me necessarily saying, I don't love that we're getting into a war with Venezuela. I don't love the bailout. But I am saying that to dismiss that automatically and say that, that's not America first, I think we need to start to think a little bit beyond that kind of small-minded version of America first. Because to tell you the truth, Americans do benefit, actually, from being the foremost superpower in the world. We benefit from primacy. It's good for America to have as much power as possible. I don't know about you guys. Maybe this is just my personal philosophy and my political philosophy. I think that it's good for America to have as much power as possible. Because the more power that we have, the more that we can use it to secure our interests, which is our own safety, our own prosperity. That's good, actually. And to the extent that America has made mistakes, It is because we have overcommitted in ways that don't actually enhance the position of America and Americans. Overturning Saddam Hussein is something that didn't really have a ton of benefits for Americans in our position in the world. It may have actually hurt us, but it did benefit Israel. That was the problem there. And the same is true with a number of other interventions and bailouts and other policies. And everything that I believe in for America First is strengthening our position. We want to be the dominant force on the globe. We don't want the Jews telling us what to do. We don't want China telling us what to do. We don't want any country, any people, any religion to stand in our way. That's the goal. We want to free ourselves from the influence of the Jews and immigrants at home. We want to free ourselves from the pressure and the threat of our strategic competitors abroad. And that starts with turning the Western Hemisphere into a fortress. I'm a believer in that. That's what autarky is about. That's what tariffs are about. This is about American revanchism. We want to rebuild America. That's what making America great again is about. What does greatness mean to you? Does greatness mean that we shrivel up like the libertarians want us to, and we don't tell anybody what to do, and we sit at the United Nations with our hands folded in our lap, and we get lectured by fucking communist third worldists and Russians and the Chinese and Netanyahu, and we raise our placard and wait our turn to speak? That's not what greatness means. Greatness means that we will become the number one superpower ever in history, and we will dominate the world. That's what greatness means. That's what it meant to be great as America. When people say make America great again, they don't mean like the 1820s. No, they mean like the 1950s, let's say, when the global empire was handed off from Britain to the United States. That's what people are talking about. When we did great things. That's what I want for America. And the beginning of that, we have to nationalize the population, only those loyal to America. Then we have to nationalize the economy. We need to rebuild our productive capacity. If you can't make tanks, if you can't make ships, if you can't make chips and semiconductors, you cannot project power. So we need to bring the workshops and the factories. We need to bring the manufacturing and advanced manufacturing back to the United States. We need to nationalize our education system. We have to harness the power of our elite human capital. Forget the best and brightest of the world. We need the best and brightest Americans to be plugged in to the research universities, to the Ivy Leagues, to get into the laboratories, get them an R&D budget, get them in the military working for the benefit of the country. And then once we shore up the interior, then we can project power abroad, and then we can make the world in our image. And not the image of Barack Obama where we're backing Malala Yousafzai or whatever and letting women vote and waving a gay pride flag in Botswana. But then we can actually spread a good message. We can actually spread our influence first and our ideology second. That's kind of my vision of America First. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit different than like the low energy Ron Paul America First, where it's like, hey man, we just want to be a republic and not bother anybody. Who are we to tell Venezuela what to do? It's their gold. What do you mean it's their gold? If they could defend it. They have 28 million people. They can't defend their gold. What do you mean? What are you talking about? It's like some fat socialist said, I'm going to give all the gold to the poor people. Oh, well, I guess we got to let them. No, I don't think so, actually. No, I think that's ridiculous. You know, you have all these like nationalism for all nations people. They're like, well, the Congolese, they have the rights to mine their own cobalt. What are you talking about? They don't wear shoes. They're barely wearing clothes. And they have the right to all the gold beneath their feet? I don't think so. So no, I disagree with that entirely. I think that we want to enhance American power. We want to use American power. The only problem, the issue, it's not that America is awesome. The issue is not that America is an awesome, mighty power that other nations tremble before. That's never been the issue. Okay, America is awesome. Submarines, missiles, aircraft carriers, that's all great. The problem is that our empire is a host nation to this alien influence. It's being used. Don't you understand? It is our weak, sclerotic system which is being hijacked and abused by this mercenary money intelligence power, world Jewry, foreign interests, special interest lobbies. That's the problem. But you're not going to tell me that we should not strive to be like Rome, that we should not strive to be like Napoleon, that we should not strive to be like these other countries. You're never going to convince me that what makes America great is that we're going to leave everybody the hell alone. You know, that we're going to make the government and the military so small we could drown it in the bathtub like Grover Norquist says. That's never been what America First is about. So, you know, again, I'm not defending these particular things, but I'm trying to get you to think of America First in a different way. It's not America First to make America a weak country that is unwilling or unable to project power in all of its forms, in all of its many forms, of which there's a variety. And what would be the argument against these things? They say national sovereignty. Who cares? Let's give them a better, let's bring American influence and, you know, we can be humane and merciful. We can give them better governance, but yes, like we're going to benefit from the relationship. That's kind of my vision of it. So when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to Argentina, these things that are happening, I can't find an ideological reason not to support it, because if we don't do it, some other country will. If we don't control these banana republics and their corrupt governments, you know, China will. And if we don't control their infrastructure, like the Panama Canal, for instance, China will. If we don't control the deep water ports and the radar dishes, some other country will. And why would we give that up? What would be the point of that, actually? Because of some abstruse theory that, you know, China's going to regret spending all this money. No, they're not. No, they're building a global footprint. They're building the scaffolding for a military footprint so that they can project power and so that they can push us around. And this rare earths export controls, that's a sign of things to come. China is asserting itself. They think they could stand up to us. Why would we tolerate that in our own neck of the woods? And I agree. Maybe we can't defend Taiwan forever. Maybe we can't defend Ukraine. But certainly we could defend the South and Central American parts of the world. You know, we have to shore up that part of it. So that's always been my worldview. You know, when we say America First as it applies to, let's say, Libya, it's like, you know, overthrowing Gaddafi, what does that actually really do for us? We don't have their oil. There's not even a government there. All it did was open the floodgates to Europe. Like, that didn't make sense. And that's my issue with it. It didn't make sense for us. Same with Assad and Saddam Hussein. Was that to enhance American power or Israel's power? It's clearly the latter. But the problem is not that we engaged a rogue country with American power. The problem is how it was done, in what direction it was done, who ultimately benefited, who conspired to make that happen. That's the issue. So we have to be careful not to go too far in the other direction and say, you know, hey man, why are we going and messing around in Venezuela? I don't know, because they're practically our neighbor. So that's my position on the whole South American offensive. It's a little bit bigger. When you treat these things in isolation, compartmentalized, you might say, oh, $40 billion bailout. How's that, America? For going to war in Venezuela, how's that? When you look at it on the whole, this is the great chessboard. This is the great chessboard with America and the other powers, and that's a game that you can't recuse yourself from. You forfeit that game, they're just going to eat your lunch. So, and like I said, no doubt America's maybe overcommitted. We're stretched too thin. That's certainly true. So I'm a big believer in we need to use power in a restrained way. We need to prioritize what's important to us. because of what is feasible while we rebuild American power, but the idea that we've just sort of like given up. And it's like, okay, well, you know, this government said that all the oil is theirs now, and then they're going to give it to China. I guess we have to abide by that. I don't think so. That's just me. But that's that. We're going to move on. We're probably just going to take super chats. I don't think we're going to get into Israel tonight because we're out of time. So we're going to move on. We'll take a look at our super chats. People in the live chat aren't liking it. Go die for Venezuela, Nick. It's not about dying. First of all, it's not a ground invasion of Venezuela. Second of all, it's not for Venezuela, stupid. I'm not saying we should liberate Venezuela for democracy. I'm saying we should take their stuff for us. And we can do it without actually a ground invasion. So that's just pussy shit. This whole like, you know, what is a war in America's interest? We're only going to fight when we're attacked. We're going to wait to be attacked. And in the meantime, we're just going to let every country, we're going to lose all our stuff. I don't think so. So, no, I'm trying to get you guys excited about, because here's the thing. That's who we are, okay? That's who we are as whites. That's who we've always been, okay? What part of explorers, conquerors, and pioneers don't you understand? It's who we are. The oceans, the continents, the moon, the stars. Nothing is beyond our reach. That's the whole point. So we got to give up on the low energy, you know, parochial isolationism. We have no right. What do you mean? You have no rights. What are you talking about? You know, Rome, that's who we are. Rome is who we are. And if you don't like that, okay, England is who we are. France, Portugal, Spain, Germany, the Dutch. That's who we are. We expand. We always expand. That's what we do. Let China be the Middle Kingdom. Let them sit back and wait for the world to come to them. They didn't build the boats. That's why we're not speaking Chinese, because they didn't build the boats. We built the ships. We mapped the stars. We crossed the ocean. Imagine if you had some low energy Spaniard who said, okay, go die for the Indians then. Yeah, okay, go die for the Tainos in the Caribbean. They conquered them. They conquered them and they took their stuff. And they became an empire and they ruled for a century. And then the Dutch did the same. And so on. And this is our destiny. This is who we are, guys. Let's get comfortable. Let's become who we are again, okay? What did you think Make America Great Again meant? We're going to take our place among the nations? Okay, now it's Africa's turn to speak. Oh, we need more. I can't do an African accent. They're gonna get up there and say, shit, we need more money, man. We need more foreign aid and shit. And we're gonna say, okay, all right. They're gonna get up and say, shit, man, we need more foreign aid. We're hungry. Well, didn't we just give you a ton of foreign aid? Shit, we spent all that already, man. Like, no, we're not going to take our place among the nations and get bossed around and told what to do and listen to everyone speak and be constrained by international law. That's gay. It's like you guys want to be in the United Nations. You think nationalism means that every country is we're all going to join the United Nations. And we're going to be on UN subcommittees debating with the indigenous tribes about, water access and nonsense like that. No, I don't think so. So anyway, that's my position. Yeah, I am going to stake out a different claim. That kind of like low energy thing, I'm not really with that. Manifest destiny, exactly. Okay? The Louisiana Purchase, the Mexican Cession, this is what we're talking about. Oh, okay, go fight and die for Mexico. Who cares? Let them have Nevada. Let them have Texas. No, dude. No, that's not who we are. So, America first means we're not going to fight these wars for Israel's expansion. It means we're going to fight them for our own expansion, probably. So that's that anyway. Let's take a look at the super chats. Let's see what you guys have to say. Oh, man, people are not going to like this.
All right, let's get right to it. First and foremost, why does Nick and Candace have to continue this beef? I feel like it clogs both of their judgment because they can't stand each other. It's causing one to be biased. And in this situation, it's causing Nick, in my opinion, to be biased and shut down every and anything that Candace brings to the table. However, when it came to these texts, exposing these texts, or just showing these texts, and people deal with death in different ways. So this may just be, Candace dealing with the death of a close friend. So she may not make every little step calculated the right way. However, us knowing how calculated Candace is in a good way, right? How strategic she is. Nick already accusing her of using Charlie's death to advance her show and all these other things. This didn't need to be put out there. Like, it's one thing putting out certain things because it's evidence or character based, as far as like they're trying to make Charlie out to be this way and see things this particular way, when in all actuality, it was this. And then you kind of feel the type of way as if, why would they try to represent it in a different way? So then you may get more and more curious. So that's where Candace is. That's where she is. Let Candace be Candace. Yeah, I don't know. When it comes to Nick, and I my professor, my old speech coach and current speech coach, she told me I got to stop saying I don't know. Whenever I'm trying to finish a thought, I say I don't know. All right, y'all hold me to it. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. And yeah, come on, Nick. Another thing I wrote down in my notes. Like, I feel like Nick's disdain for Candace, along with a bunch of other things, I should say, just makes him feel like he has to overdo it with all the t-shirts, using the N-word, him always trying to, either calling Candace a B or calling Candace whatever. I feel like you don't have to lean into trying to attract that part of your audience. And I'm not saying that you're doing it like you're fake and phony, but it just comes across like, bro, like maybe because you've shifted your stance on other issues that they're not with you on, that you feel like you have to connect back with them. And this is the easiest way to bring them on board, by triggering their emotions, because they like to say N-word and all this other stuff. And they like to see somebody else say it, just because you're not supposed to. You don't have to do all that. You don't have to do all that. I'm not saying that you are, but if there's a little bit of it that's causing that, it just seems like it's for the wrong reasons, man. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being sensitive. Y'all may say that I'm being triggered emotionally by it, but I just don't feel like that's necessary. I feel like it always goes overboard, and it turns off a lot of people that would really be just rocking with, not just rocking with your message, but just on board with moving things forward and seeing that the current establishment is set up in a way that's detrimental to all of us. So let's move on. Let's move on before y'all start saying I don't know what y'all would say. See, said I don't know again. Venezuela. So I guess I started asking some questions, looking in my notes. I said, has Venezuela aligned with our adversaries? And it says China, and I think I have another question. China is becoming one of the biggest trade partners in Central and South America. So I wasn't aware of that. I actually wanted to, let me actually look this up real quick. Hold on, y'all bear with me. We got ChatGPT for a reason. Has Venezuela sided with American enemies? Let's see. Because Nick may have mentioned it. I may have missed that. All right, so ChatGPT says, yes, in many ways, Venezuela under Nicolas Maduro has aligned itself with nations and actors that the United States considers adversaries. Here's a breakdown of how this manifests, what sliding with means in this context, and ignore that. All right, so ways Venezuela has sided with U.S. adversaries: strong ties with Russia, China, and Iran. Well, I guess there you go. Venezuela is described as Russia's most important trading and military ally in Latin America. Its relationship with China is deep in the economic sphere, particularly loans and infrastructure investment. The country shares ideological affinity with Iran and has been part of rhetorical coalitions positioning against U.S. influence. They also have, seems like, a lot of opposition to the U.S. foreign policy positions, military and strategic cooperation, sanctions. So let's actually look up under the U.S. foreign policy positions. Under both Hugo Chavez and Maduro, Venezuela's foreign policy shifted markedly away from the U.S. friendly axis and toward anti-imperialist style alliances. All right, so I assume that that's what they're talking about in the previous, as far as them having strong ties with Russia, China, and I guess Iran. All right, so I get it. So I guess for me, it comes down to the question that Nick was posing. Do you think that we should flex our muscle? Do you think that we should just take things just because other people can't guard them? Y'all heard him going off towards the end of the show where he's talking about the gold. He said, you got people walking barefoot, people walking barefoot. I'm not laughing to be offensive, but people walking barefoot with gold underneath their feet. And he was saying how if you can't protect it, like it's yours unless you can't protect it. So therefore we could just take it. I don't know if that's the mindset. You know, what does the Bible say, Nick? That violence only begets violence, right? Doesn't it say something similar to that, if not that? Violence is only going to lead to more violence. It also says no vengeance. This wouldn't be vengeance. This would just be for positioning and power. I don't think that aligns with Christian values, even though people have committed a lot of these colonizing activities in the name of religion, if we're just being honest. But I just don't see why we need to go into another country. And you know what? Perhaps intention does matter. And when I say intention matters, I'm talking about what is really our intention? What is our true intention in getting involved in a lot of these wars? And maybe this is what Nick is talking about when he says that it's not that he was against war, but he just thinks that the country should be a little bit more transparent and honest with us when it comes to the wars that we're getting involved in. So I can understand that, but I'm against the wars. But let me say again, intent does matter. If we were getting involved in some of these foreign affairs to truly bring about peace as the power on this planet, right? If we were truly using our power to try to bring about peace and being a representation of the peace that we're saying that we want to create in a lot of these other nations, I think that's key. We always talk about on our morning show how important it is to be the change. After we do all the complaining about what this group's doing, what this group's turning into, what this political party is pushing, when we look for answers, it always comes down to being the change ourselves. So I just don't see where all this gets us. If we're just playing a power game with whoever's in power, they could take everybody's stuff and try to take as many people's stuff. So therefore that'll give us more power and have a bigger gap on whoever's next in power. Then I just don't think that's the way that humanity is going to get to the goal that I'd like to work towards, which is achieving that greater peace and having all of us live in harmony. But let's keep going. I know he spoke about Argentina. Let me actually move on, from those. I want to talk about something that I may have been I don't know, I may have had a little baby epiphany. I don't know. Maybe I'm just opening my eyes to it. But Trump made this clear before. Remember when a lot of people were opposing certain things that he was doing, mainly with his actions supporting Israel, and they were saying how Donald Trump isn't moving in a America First way, and Donald Trump responded how? He said, I am America First. Trump really does believe that he's America First. So therefore, in his mind, when, let's say he wants to do a deal with somebody just because he likes them, maybe do a favor with another world leader just because he likes them. A lot of people may look at his relationship with Saudi or I should say Qatar, and different relationships that he has in that Middle Eastern region, especially with the plans that him, Jared Kushner, and others have for that region. I really do believe that in his mind, and maybe I'm being a bit naive. Maybe I'm being a bit naive as I'm processing it. But what I was going to say, and then I'll let y'all know if I'm being naive or if I agree with it. What I was going to say is when Trump sees something that's good for Trump in his mind, call it delusion, call it whatever, but he associates that with being America First. So perhaps a lot of these decisions that he's making where we're looking at him like, bro, you're crazy. This is not what we voted for you for. This is not what you were running on. And he's just making whatever decision that comes to mind, or whatever decision that what a lot of people are complaining about, if we're just being real, when it comes to being bullied by Bibi Netanyahu in Israel. You call a ceasefire, they violate it before you wake up the next day. You're pushing for these things. You're tucking Bibi Netanyahu's chair in. You're cursing on TV because you're frustrated, and then trying to put blame on both Iran and Bibi. But in all actuality, I think that was the Iran that was the Iran situation with Bibi Netanyahu. You're trying to put blame on both, saying they both don't know what the F they're doing. Keep it real. You were really just directing that towards Bibi Netanyahu and Israel, if we're being honest. So now I'm starting to think about all the money that Trump really took, that a lot of us, or let me just speak for myself, I didn't pay attention to. We always talk about follow the money, one of the greatest lines from one of the greatest shows, The Wire. We always talk about follow the money. However, in the first election, I guess people did follow it and realize that he wasn't taking a lot of outside funding, or, funding from these groups that may hold him, hostage when he actually gets in office. He didn't have that. He didn't owe people. Whenever you give somebody money, you owe them a favor. You work for them now until you pay off that debt. So therefore, if we would have looked at this situation with Trump, and we did know about Miriam Edelson, I believe that's her name. We did know about her giving a lot of money, but I just didn't look into it like that. I just didn't look into it like that, because everything now, when you look at following the money and you understand, okay, boom, he got a certain amount of money. Now he has to do certain things that are aligned with the agenda of the people that gave him that money. Then things start to make sense. But let's continue. Nick was going off, man. I'll finish it off with this. Hopefully I'll finish it off with this. So I quoted a bunch of things that Nick was saying at the end. Some of these quotes, some of them I may have already read, but he said, we benefit from primacy. That's kind of wild, man. That's kind of wild. Is that what, when I think about Christians and what would Jesus do, is that giving off what would Jesus do energy? I don't know. I don't think so. Then he says, it's good for America to have as much power as possible. I understand that. But I also like to add the context of, intent matters. And when you're talking about power, what are you doing with the power that you actually have? And at what point is enough power, or what point is enough when it comes to power? Because the more powerful you get, then the more powerful the people chasing you, they have to become and work towards that. So it's just I don't want to give off that energy. So I'm not rocking with that, but to each their own. It's not your gold if you can't defend it. Y'all heard that one. And then he said, they're barely wearing shoes and they have the right to gold under their feet. This is not funny. They're barely wearing shoes and they have the right to gold under their feet. He asked a question. So Nick believes if we stop trying to play the game, someone will come and eventually eat our lunch. So that's what he's talking about, competing. Like, we're competing whether we like it or not, especially as China and Russia, number 2, and I guess what you may say number 3, they're gaining ground on us, so to say. I'm not saying we should liberate Venezuela for democracy. I'm saying we should take their stuff. So this is, not that I need to hear all those quotes, but this is when I wrote in my notes, we have an ideological difference. Nick and I just seem to have an ideological difference. And it does seem like Nick has changed his stance on certain things because of his bias, because of maybe some of the things that we mentioned, or just, I don't know. I really don't know. But let's pay attention to that. Let me keep going. And I shouldn't have given y'all that thought without being able to clarify everything, but I just need a little bit more time processing that one, if that's okay. But yes, we have an ideological difference. And he says, this is the last quote, or second to last quote, that's who we are as whites. That's who we've always been. It's who we are. The ocean, the moon, the stars, nothing is beyond our reach. Yo, man, come on, bro. If I heard it in a different setting, And, you know, he didn't just use the word whites, but I mean, even I get, yeah, I'm telling you, for me, how I would relate to it. If it was not using the word whites and I heard that, I would almost get behind this. It would sound motivational, inspirational. That's who we are as Americans. That's who we've always been. It's who we are. The ocean, the moon, the stars, nothing is beyond our reach. That doesn't have to mean taking other people's stuff. Perhaps that's just elevating on a conscious level, elevating your frequency to not have to get involved in a lot of these wars like a lot of our other countries do, and be able to figure things out peacefully. Am I living in a bubble? Maybe I am, but that's what I'm searching for. That's what I'm searching for. One thing that I did laugh at, and we actually had a laugh at this one when he said, or no, Maya was saying, Nick's just saying that, well, is it cool, Maya? I don't remember. Yeah. All right, never mind. Maya didn't say it. I said it. But when we heard Nick saying a lot of these things, the response was, you know, I was just thinking like Nick's just saying, like, let me ask the question, is Nick saying the quiet part out loud? Is Nick saying what a lot of other people may believe as well? Now, to what lengths they'll go to accomplish it, that can be debatable. But do a lot of other people have this same colonizing mindset that Nick has? And is Nick just willing to say it? Perhaps that's why he has the following that he has, because he's willing to say what other people want to say, but don't necessarily have the courage to say. And I think they finished it off with Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny. And if y'all aren't aware of it, look up the Doctrine of Discovery. Let me make sure that's the name of it. The Doctrine of Discovery. I believe that's the name. Let me check, Chappie. Yeah, the Doctrine of Discovery is a historical and legal principle that played a massive role in European colonization and the dispossession of indigenous peoples across the Americas, Africa, and beyond. So check that out. Check out that Doctrine of Discovery. All right, so we're going to wrap it up. Y'all going to enjoy the rest of your day, evening, AM, whatever it is, depending on when we get this video out. I'm getting ready to go head to dinner, go relax the rest of the evening. As always, appreciate y'all tapping in, appreciate y'all engaging, appreciate y'all giving me a chance to interact with y'all. And I appreciate y'all sharing your perspectives, those that do write a comment. I always ask you all to write comments because I know that I have biases. I try to be as objective as possible. However, sometimes we're all swayed one way or another just based on our previous experience and what can trigger us emotionally in a lot of cases. But we try to just move with logic and be as practical as possible. So make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notifications on if you haven't already. Leave that comment. Got to say it 3 times for Dr. Umar, and I'll see y'all soon.
It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.